Oh, Joe back.
We are back. How's it going, Dave?
And the music. Ah, man, it's going great, everybody. Welcome to Dave and Joe Are Bored. And for the first time, we're trying this live on YouTube.
The kids watch YouTube, I hear.
YouTube.
The kids watch YouTube.
That's exciting. I have no idea. I see it looked like somebody was watching, and now no one is. So who knows if this is working or not. But Joe, how the heck are you?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, doing really, really well. I'm excited about got sort of a monster theme episode here.
We do, and we've got our super special guest, Michael T. Gilbert, which I'm a big fan of. This is always here.
Yeah.
The little shrine is always next to me. So I didn't do this just for the show. So
Yeah, we got Mr. Monster for our monster themed episode. Can't do better than that.
I'm nerding out. So all right, now let's just get to your moment in the sun. Your every week we have to do Joe Holland's Bob Dylan Minute. Give Joe a minute to shine. Now, while you do this, I have to time your minute, but at the same time, I'm going to see if I can figure out if YouTube actually, is saying we're on.
Okay.
So I'm just going to say, Joe, start the clock, and here you go, babe.
All righty. So last week, in honor of Bob Dylan's forthcoming book, comes out here in about 3 weeks now, I think 3-4 weeks. I talked about his first published book, which was Tarantula, a book of poems. So the next credited, looks like we're on YouTube. Good. The next credited, really book by Bob Dylan is this writings and drawings, and it was originally published in the 70s, and then this is the one that I have, which was then updated in the mid 80s. So in the old days, before the internet, and you wanted to look up song lyrics, you had to look in something called a book like this. And so this is just, a few hundred pages of song lyrics of Bob Dylan up through 1985. And this also has some drawings like this that kind of go along with some of the songs. And then here is an updated, really not truly a new updated version of that book, but it's an updated version of the same idea with his.
All right, Joe, that's your minute. Thanks so much, Joe. Do you have anything to finish up with, Joe?
No, that's it. Just continuing the publishing history of Bob Dylan's bibliography.
Joe, do you break just like a little girl?
Well, Dave, you not sure how to respond to that, but
no, who is? But as you break like a little girl, you got to have your brand new leopard skin pillbox hat on. That's a good spread that you showed, by the way.
Yeah. I knew that was your wheelhouse there.
Baby. I like that album. All right. Once again, every week we do our pick of the week. Now this is a special week for picking. Because I'm so happy for you. And I just want to say, spoiler alert for anybody that has not watched some of their Disney Plus Marvel Cinematic Universe, but the Werewolf by Night special introduced one of Joe's. Oh, you go, Joe.
All right. Well, in honor of, here it is. There we go. I've got my Man-Thing shirt on in honor of Man-Thing making his debut in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't know how much spoilers we're going to go on that, but I'll just talk about. So here in honor of that and October and Halloween and monsters and all that, this seemed like the right day to talk about Marvel Team Up number 68 with Spider-Man and the Man-Thing.
Now, Joe, if you had to be buried with one comic,
this is probably the one, and I would just want the cover on my face. Yes.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
Maybe that's how you break like a little girl. I don't know.
Yeah. So the story here is this actually not this comic itself. This originally was published in 1978. I'm way too young. It seems kind of weird to say that, but I'm way too young to have bought that comic off the rack. But one of the very first comics that I ever remember owning was the Marvel Tales issue that reprints this story. But this is the original from 1978 Marvel Team Up Spider-Man Man-Thing. And I absolutely just love this comic, but really it's the cover. The cover image, just when I was about an 8-year-old kid.
You like Spider-Man's butt.
I love Spider-Man. No, not so much that part, but the monster coming out of the background there. You know, as a kid, I always loved monsters. Not so much like horror stuff really, but monsters, you know, King Kong and Ray Harryhausen type stuff. And so Man-Thing, a creature from the Black Lagoon, you know, all that kind of stuff. So Man-Thing just was right in that wheelhouse. This is also John Byrne, who is probably my very favorite superhero comic book artist. Here's the opening splash page again. You know, that those images of this monster Man-Thing lumbering, you know, reaching out for Spider-Man and everything. Just as a little kid, I was hooked. And that issue, again, really the story of this issue really isn't, you know, it's not, I wouldn't claim it's the greatest comic of all time or anything. Introduced this, the villain Despair, which I remember being a little kid and not sure how you were supposed to pronounce that, and calling him Despair or something, you know.
Which, you know, this issue for a tiny speculative moment was kind of hot, because there was a big rumor in maybe one of the early scripts that Despair was the villain in the most recent, or was going to be the villain in the most recent Doctor Strange movie. So for a little bit of time, people were like, oh, that's the Marvel team. And I was thinking, oh, that's good news for Joe. So, but that movie came and went, and no Despair. So womp womp. Sorry, Joe. But now Man-Thing, and people now know. And here's the reason why I'm so excited, because not only do you like this comic, but as an art collector, you have gone on to commission way too many artists to give their version of this comic's cover. And so I threw in just a smattering of some of them for you to kind of show everybody.
Fantastic. We could do a whole episode on this.
Oh, and you go over to your Comic Art Fan page and you'll see more of them. But there's good old little Johnny Byrne.
Yeah, this is John Byrne. I had him redo a version of that cover. This was the first John Byrne commission that I ever got. This was from 2007. And he commented on his forum at one point. He said that he thought that was one of his favorite images of Spider-Man that he had ever drawn. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, there you go.
Yep. So I had the original artist do it. And then I've had a lot of people do their take on it, like Dave said. So this is the great legendary Sal Buscema. Everybody loves our pal Sal.
Oh, Sal's the best.
Yeah. So that's
still
great.
Getting it done. Still getting it done. Good old Sal.
Yeah, he is. Stuff still looks absolutely great. So that's a great one. Sal Buscema is one of my favorite artists, just period, and definitely one of my favorite Spider-Man artists. This is and so this shows, you know, my if there's a theme to it really in my collection, it's just images kind of based on that cover. So sometimes I ask artists I usually just tell the artists I collect images based on that cover, and kind of let them do what they want to do with it. You know, they may turn Spider-Man around different directions, kind of like those two. And then this one is Roger Langridge.
I love Roger's work so much.
Yes.
So great.
Yeah, everything he does is great. He did some Popeye comics and some Muppet comics and stuff that are just great. So for him, I had him do a Popeye version here, as you can see, of that cover. So it's Popeye in the role of Spider-Man and Alice the Goon coming out of the swamp instead of Man-Thing. And I love that. That's a great commission.
And what do you got next? There's just good. And Ron, and of course, Ron, if you're going to have Sal, you got to throw in Ron because
Yes.
they're kind of like Reese's peanut butter cups or whatever.
Yeah, so Ron Friend's version of it. So this I asked him to replace Spider-Man with Spider-Girl. Obviously, the great he had a great run on that Spider-Girl comic back about 20 years ago, probably now or so.
Time has no meaning.
Yeah. So that part I requested. He threw in the despair up there at the top. That was just his addition to the piece there. Great stuff. And is there another one? Yes.
Oh yeah.
Mike Allred.
Oh man,
Yes.
I love Mike Allred. That's so great.
The great Mike Allred, and this again. I think I did request that he include despair in it, which you can, but it's kind of wonky there. I don't really, it's Mike Allred. It's great.
Yep, it's in motion and it's Ginchy. So what more do you want? That's awesome, babe. All righty. Well, and like I said, you have way too many of these. And if you're bored and you're not familiar, there's a website called Comic Art Fans, and you've got your collection up there for people to see if they want to take a look.
Yep.
So okay, so now I picked one of my favorite monster comics in a pure move of kissing up to our guest. I picked my absolute favorite Mr. Monster comic, number 2, which I absolutely love. And we'll be talking with Michael T. Gilbert in a second here all about this. But to begin with, Dave Stevens is a huge deal to me. So right away, this cover is one of my favorites and really just fills me with regret that I never bought the dang poster of this cover because, boy, I would have liked that too. But, and I'm a Little Rascals fan, so you got a little bit of that thrown in. So this issue is great. This is really, to me, when things were hitting the ground running. 1985, I think it was published. But this issue introduces Hemo Boy. And I love Hemo Boy so much. He's got a jar of hemoglobin. His head's a jar of blood. That's the best thing ever. Story, Michael writes, draws. Well, that's the sound of my email coming through, and does everything. This one inked by Bill Loebs, colored by Michael, and we'll talk to him. Like I said, mere minutes away. But now I'm going to just show a little bit about this. The little kids don't like Hemo Boy, so they sick Mr. Monster on him, and then Mr. Monster finds out the real story of what's going on, and monsters and wackiness ensues. And so, and this I think is what this one is what got me hooked on Mr. Monster. I just love it so much. And so there you go. And that's my Hemo Boy sketch.
That's great.
That my brother got me 30 dang years ago. So yeah, been a while. So that's it for me. So without further ado, let's just say tonight we've got Michael T. Gilbert here as our guest. And once again, this is a guy who writes, draws, colors. I mean, he's kind of there and does it all.
Doesn't
and
staple the comics together himself.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was a point that he did. I mean, I guess he's a little lazy, doesn't letter. I mean, but if you got Ken Brusnak helping you out, I wouldn't letter either. So we're going to spend a little time with Michael T. Gilbert, ladies and gentlemen. Without further ado, here he is. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Hi, Joe.
Oh, baby. I have all these nice things to say, and then when it actually comes time,
It disappears.
It all disappears.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do? But thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, my pleasure.
So you've been doing this a long time, And one of the things that is so cool about it is, like I said, you are kind of that traditional cartoonist in the sense of being a kind of a one-man band. Was that always come natural for you? Was that always your goal? Like when you were a little young teenage Michael T. Gilbert,
Mm-hmm.
You were a comics fan, obviously, and
Sure.
was the dream from the start to not only just work in comics, but to write, draw, and do as much as you could? Or did it just happen that way?
Well, I always loved comics. I started reading when I was 6 or 7. My grandmother gave me a copy, and I fell in love. And when I was about, 10 years old, I started doing drawings of superheroes, crude little drawings. But I would always think about different stories in my head that go behind the pictures and whatnot. But for years, I just thought of myself as a cartoonist or a wannabe cartoonist. And the thing about doing your own stories is I didn't have a writer, so I had to come up with my own stories in order to illustrate my stories. So I started doing those. And over the years, I found myself getting better with the artwork. And I figured, well, I better get better with the stories. Then I get better with the stories. Well, I better get better with the artwork again, So I kept competing with myself for that to try and get better.
So I want to talk just briefly. I could talk to you about your entire career for a lot longer than we have time for tonight, but it's I'm kind of fascinated about your 20s, which was basically the 1970s.
Mm-hmm.
You spent the 70s and your 20s building your craft. How much time? What was that? What was the day job, I guess, for you when you were in your 20s? Like, how much time did comics take up of your life? Was it after work? Was it work? I mean, obviously it was work, but were you able to make it the day job?
Well, yes and no. I mean, first of all, I started when I was still in college, drawing some of that stuff. So, anytime I could skip a class to do some drawing, I would do that. And you also mentioned you were talking about the jack of all trades thing. When I started out, I actually started out self-publishing my own comic book, New Paltz Comics. I was going to SUNY New Paltz, upstate New York. And at a certain point, I was going door to door selling the comic book. So that was truly, doing it all. I would sometimes I would get, when I was out of college, I was fortunate enough. I moved. I was in New York for about a year after college. I was born in New York and raised there, and got a job in New York City working for NBC News doing graphics for about a year. That was my first job. Just stumbled onto that one by sheer accident. I was, going past some door looking for work, and I saw this place called Vismo. I knocked on the door. Turns out they did graphics for NBC across the street. And they gave me a chance. But unfortunately, they lost the account about 6 months later, and I got some job at a place called Hit Sales that was doing art for keychains and all that other stuff. And in between, I was still doing my comics on the side. And then about a year into it, I found myself getting kind of really bored doing that kind of stuff. And I was in New York. I didn't have any money, and it was, typical starving cartoonist sort of situation. And someone put the idea in my head, why not move to California? Which I'd never thought about before that. So I got myself, I had 4 duffel bags of stuff, went on some old hippie bus to get to San Francisco, knew nothing about anything. I had like $400 to my name. Really didn't know anybody, and got down there. Wound up with the Moonies for a couple of weeks. As soon as the day I came off the bus into Berkeley, I got captured by some girl who said, "Hey, you want a free meal?" And this and that, and that was how they get you in there. But that only lasted a couple weeks before I finally wised up and got out of there. Um, but I had I got an apartment with a few other people, and that was great. But my money was starting, $400. I was running out, and I hadn't gotten any work. I knocked on some doors, was trying to get some cartooning work, but this was 1975, and I had thought that I'm gonna, see if I can break into underground comics. I couldn't, I had tried, some attempts with comic books in New York, the mainstream, and struck out. Unfortunately, 1975 was the time that the underground industry collapsed for various reasons. So good luck with that. So I was down to my last, maybe $100 at this point, and I went to the campus, and they had positions available. This professor couple in their 70s had this thing where they would let people do work around their house for 15 hours for room and board. A very nice house in Orinda, California. And I was lucky enough to do that, and wound up doing that for 4 years. And 15 hours is nothing, and I was able to spend the rest of my time doing comics. So it was just an ideal situation.
Wow. And so we've got a little bit of some of the 70s stuff that you did, a little bit with An American Splendor with Harvey.
Mm-hmm.
But now, you weren't in Ohio at that time, were you?
When I was working on that, no.
Okay.
I was in Texas at that point. I had moved from had been living in California. Met some woman, got married. We moved to Texas, and I was a fan of this stuff. So I wrote to him and asked if he'd be interested in basically my doing some work for him, and he gave me a few stories, which I illustrated. Those are some of them over there.
Was he a character, or how much interaction did you have with Harvey?
Well, the interaction was over the telephone, because he was quite a distance away, and he would largely tell me the stories instead of sending me. I think he might have sent some thumbnail sketch or something like that, but it was difficult. I remember one time I was working on something that had a statue of Mark Hanna, who was some politician in a local Cleveland thing that had a statue of him. And I asked him to send me some photos of the thing, but he never did. So I had to fake it. And as a matter of fact, I said, can you send me some photographs of you so I can do my version of you? And he said, you can do Jerry Shamray's version, and that's good enough. You can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, sort of faking it, but but it's fun working on these. It's a challenge when you're doing a cartoon where, quote unquote, nothing happens, people sitting around talking, as opposed to, throwing lightning bolts or whatever. Yeah. So it challenges you to make it interesting, changing camera angles and using expressions and body language to get the point across. So it's fun.
And you were also working on your Wraith series.
Right. That's when I started in 1976. I was doing work I wanted to get work with Star Reach, and I had come to Mike Friedrich, who had living not too far away, and I showed him samples trying to get into the Star Reach science fiction fantasy comic book that he was publishing. He looked at my stuff, kind of liked it, but said, there's nothing here that I want to buy for the book. And I said, well, okay, I figured that was that. And a couple of weeks later, I get a call from him and saying that he has this new comic book, funny animal comic called Quack. One of the artists who was supposed to be doing it flaked out, and they had a hole in the thing. And they said, can you come up with, have you ever done funny animal stuff before? And I said, of course, which I never had, of course. And can you come up with some character? So I came up with, I was thinking about a number of different things, a science fiction strip or, a Western strip or whatever with funny animals. But ultimately, I figured, I only had a few days to come up with this. I said, why not do a funny animal version of The Spirit? I was just this huge Will Eisner fan. And I figured this would be a good basic structure. I should also mention, by the way, when you said I don't do lettering, I actually did do lettering for the Wraith, and I've done some logos for different comic books over the years. So
fine, be that way.
But I can't compete with Ken Bruzenak, who just makes this stuff just shine like crazy.
And so it seemed like that era in your life kind of peaked with your Strange Brew collection. Like that was kind of this weird bridge between the work you were doing in your 20s and what ended up coming next, which was you got in touch with Dave Sim was a fan of the Wraith. Was that how this was a collection of previous work that you had done? It was kind of like a nice, I don't know, little portfolio piece of your work all in one place.
Yeah, Dave Simon contacted me. He was a fan of the Wraith. He really liked it, and I like Cerebus too. So, and he was talking about he and his wife at the time, Denny Lubert, wanted to put a book together collecting the best of my work. So indeed, I did my older stuff, and I did a new Wraith story for it and a new cover. As it turned out, the technology wasn't such to make a book that was, I think it was 48 pages or something like that. So it was a big comic book ultimately instead of the book we envisioned. But I was certainly happy to get all these things pulled together for the first time.
Yeah, somebody online when they were talking about this had kind of shared a Dopey Comics Journal review of it, and it seemed like they were kind of saying, okay, we've been following you a bit, over the past 5+ years. Okay, Michael T. Gilbert, come on, either really get to it or, go home. It was like they were laying down some baloney gauntlet, which in retrospect is kind of hysterical knowing what comes next. Because what comes next from you as you start getting into the 1980s is just some of the coolest comics that I remember seeing or have ever seen. Because to begin with, now my brother was the ELRIC or is the ELRIC fan. So he got all of these. And these were comics based on Michael Moorcock's character.
Yeah.
It's either one or the other.
Can you say it on TV?
But this was a Pacific Comics, and it was Roy Thomas adapting the books, and it was you and P. Craig Russell just getting it done. Holy crackers, these were cool comics. So what the heck, how the heck did this pairing of the three of you happen?
Well, it was pretty interesting. I mentioned that I was doing the Wraith for Quack. That lasted 6 issues, and the comic went down. And shortly after, the Starridge Company went under. But Mike Friedrich went into becoming an agent for creators. And Craig Russell was one of his, and Michael Moorcock was one, and Roy Thomas. And Craig had done an ELRIC graphic novel for Marvel, and it was just magnificent piece there. But the Pacific Comic was a new company that came out and wanted to do a series featuring ELRIC, and they wanted Craig to do it. Well, Craig didn't think, he was worried that it would be more work than he wanted to do for himself. But he said, maybe, we work with someone else. And he suggested me.
And let's, if I can interject, Craig, especially at the time, was relying on a lot of photo reference for his gorgeous drawings, which is very time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes total sense that he would kind of look at a continuing series and think, oh, geez, you want me to keep going?
Mm-hmm.
Oof.
Well, plus he was working on other projects, I think, at the same time, too. So that was pulling things away. but I had just done a 3-page segment in a jam book of the Spirit, and I had spent weeks and weeks doing 3 pages of this exquisite work. Well, he saw that and probably figured I could do that in a day or two. And we'd also met at a convention a few months earlier, and really hit it off. We liked each other's work and everything. Seemed like just really nice guy, which he is. And so they asked me if I'd be interested in working on this, but the trick was I had to move from Texas to Ohio in order to work with them on this project. Well, as it happened, a few months earlier, my first wife had left me, and so I was.
Wait, can we hold on? It's a horrible noise to play for that.
So I was at a perfect time to wanting to start a new life and a new place and this and that. And I was thinking, geez, this would be great. I can move to a new place, Ohio, and a new phase in my career at the same time. And I would, no distractions anymore, personal life wise. So I did that, and we started working on the project at that point. Now, let me tell you, it was extremely intimidating, having seen what Craig did on the Marvel ELRIC. Luckily, I have enough of an ego myself that I was able to say, well, I guess I can, do that, because one of the strengths I've always had is trying to experiment with different art styles and different writing styles and such. So I have a fair amount of range. So I was figuring, okay, let's do this, and Craig was going to be laying out the stories. If something gets too bad, he's going to be finishing the stuff. He can, fix it also. So this is what was going on.
Well, and so I don't have these comics. They're in my brother's basement somewhere, and thankfully I do have the very first issue, which was on my spinner rack, and so it was neat to see. Just and read about, because you write in that issue about how the two of you truly were collaborators in how that nothing was that cut and dry of, oh, he only did this and this and I only did that and that. It was, he did this and this, but if I wanted to do that and that over here, I did that, and then over here maybe he did, and then we switched off this and that, and the end result is just some of the most gorgeous stuff, because it doesn't look necessarily like your work, and it doesn't look like P. Craig Russell's work. It looks like this really cool combination where you see your work and you see his work, and it's just this super cool little combo, and it's gorgeous stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we worked like hell on this, of course. I realized that this was going to be my big chance. It was the Wraith was my first series, but this was my second series, my first color series. And whereas with the Wraith, I might, have to do 5 or 6 pages in 3 months, and maybe another one would be 11 pages in 3 months. Well, this was, 32 pages every couple of months. I mean, 2 people doing it, but still drawing it and then coloring it was going to be.
And I don't know if I have any color pages here. In fact, that's kind of getting into the next series. But the colors are gorgeous, and it's you and Pete Craig doing the colors, and you're doing them on stats and watercolors and what but it's painted colors, and they're gorgeous.
Yeah, well, that was another thing that made it very tricky, because this was in the early days of full color comics.
Yeah.
And, I came over there when I figured, well, we're doing a 6-issue full color series. Obviously, they must know what they're doing, and it's all set up and will be set. Well, no, it wasn't that. I mean, Craig had done a full color thing with the Marvel thing, but he had painted the original artwork, and we were not doing that. And they gave us these photostats. We're going to do it in gray line, which means there's a small gray, reduced gray thing, that comic book size. And there's a black plate on top. You're supposed to color on the gray thing, and the black goes, and you have the black and white is really sharp, and the color is sharp. This and that. Yep. So great. So we're getting close to winter in Ohio. A depressing time if you're here by yourself. And we were trying this thing. Started to paint the gray lines on this slick paper. Well, they had made it super slick, so it wouldn't absorb the paint. And
yeah.
I said, "Oh my God, what are we going to do now? This isn't working."
Yeah, because you got to have that toned down blue line, gray line version on a Bristol, on some sort of art paper that actually takes the damn paint.
Yeah, it's got to hold on to it. This and that. So we're sitting at a place called Jerry's Diner, this depressing diner in Kent, Ohio.
Is it still there?
Unfortunately, no, it's not. It went. And we're thinking what to do. And I finally got the idea, we can take our artwork, or take the black stats and make Xeroxes on cardstock and use that as the color, which is what we did for the first couple of issues until they finally got the kinks out. And by issue 3, we were able to do it the way it should be and look a lot sharper. And when the comic was eventually reprinted by Graffiti, we went back and did the first 2 issues the same way too. So they all look really nice on that one.
Oh man!
But it was very depressing.
Well, and that's your first winter too, while you're dealing with it, and to go from California, Texas. Now you had at least known winter before. It's not like you were born in California.
No, I was a New Yorker, for many years. For over 25 years.
But if you hadn't been there in a while, to get hit with a Cleveland area and Ohio winter.
Well, it was not only that, is that I came here with a car from Texas. It was a 1959 Volkswagen that basically had no heat. So it's like, I had bought this like 6 months before I got this offer, and suddenly here I am. It's one thing if you're in Texas, but it was very, very tough here.
So you're working your tail off on this. It's at least going well. Pacific, the checks aren't bouncing. It's.
No, they were a good company at that point. They were, they're paying their bills, and we actually got a halfway decent salary at that point.
And the ELRIC books, from remembering my brother's collection, went on for years. In fact, the next batch was with you and Roy and George Freeman.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, you lose Big Craig Russell, which that's not good. No. But you bring in George Freeman, mm-hmm. who I'm a huge fan of, and the work is still gorgeous.
Well, it was very exciting. I was a big George Freeman fan too. He has a very slick, polished style, and the thing that I liked about this series, with the first series with Craig did the majority of the layouts. I was always champing at the bit to do layouts, and sometimes I would do a segment or a few pages of this. Well, at this point, I was doing, I was laying out the entire book, and George would do the finishes. So I had a chance to do my own storytelling, which I always thought is one of my strong points. And this was kind of tricky too, because we're doing this ELRIC series for the second one, and ELRIC, which I didn't know, had never read ELRIC until I got this job, and then I started reading, the books. Well, apparently he was part of an eternal soldier, which with different. He was different characters in different books, but they were all the same character. So I had to try and go out here and try and figure out, okay, how do I get the visuals for all these different characters that I've never seen before? Fortunately, I wrote in the letter page asking for some, if anybody had some suggestions and such, and people wrote back and helped. So the four who are one is what they call them.
Yeah, and I had never I would just see the comics lying around and just know the names, but I was never a big fantasy reader. But boy, yeah, my brother had books, he had comics, and I just kind of go, ooh. But okay, on a sidebar,
Mhm.
Why can't anybody get George Freeman out of Canada to come visit us in America at some conventions? Because, oh man, I'd like to meet George Freeman and like throw money at him and have him draw me Batman or something. Because, oh, he's so good.
Oh, he is good. I mean, I saw him one time at San Diego Con, so apparently he does upon occasion come down south of the border. But I suspect if the right people ask him, I'm sure he'd be happy too.
And I just in June, and I bought a comic collection, and it included a full run of Captain Canuck, which I had never really seen those before. And always knew who the character was because I grew up in Detroit, but had never seen. And those comics were beautiful. So
yeah, I think that's where I first saw George's work, was on those Captain Canucks. And later on, after this, a few years after this, I actually got him to do a Mr. Monster story with me. It was just gorgeous, of course.
oh man, oh well, you're doing that, and that's keeping you busy. And at the same time, you're kind of offered a short story, what was going to be a short story for what was it? Was it Vanguard?
Vanguard Illustrated, yeah.
And you went back and thought of the time and a convention in 1971?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had been at a New York Comic Con in 1971. I was probably about 20 years old at that point. And I saw a table on the last day of the convention. There was this big wooden table filled with old comic books. A lot of them had coverless comics, old, some Superman comics from the 40s. And like I said, they were like 50 cents or $1 each. And one of the coverless comics was this thing here that you're looking at, this Mr. Monster. I had no idea where this was from, but I was just really struck by this character. He's just such an interesting looking character with a terrific hook, which he was he specialized in killing monsters. And I said, how cool is that? There was some picture in there where he just puts a gun in a monster's mouth, pulls the trigger, and you see the brain splattering out here, which was pretty shocking. Yeah, this guy Fred Kelly did this, and I later learned that he had done a comic strip called Doc Stern, who was a Doc Savage time adventurer, and the very last issue of that, he changed him into Mr. Monster, as you have him over here, and in the last panel. And then the next is the company went under, and he had one more book, Super Duper Comics, where you saw that color version, and that was the coverless comic that I found. And they had just one Mr. Monster adventure, and then the whole company went under, and that was that. Well, after I finished the first ELRIC series in 1982 with Craig, and there was going to be a few months break between starting the second series with George, because Craig had gotten too busy with other projects to continue. My agent wanted to keep me busy, so he talked to these Vanguard Illustrated, which was going to be an anthology comic that Pacific Comics was putting out. And they said, we're doing new series. Can you come up with some kind of series that we can use for the book? And so I started thinking about what I could do once again, just like I did with the Wraith. Can I do a Western science fiction? And I started looking through my old comics to see if there was, my Golden Age comics, to see if there was any idea that would spark something in me. And then I saw this coverless comic. I had been talking about this. I had forgotten about this for a while, but I've been talking about, wouldn't it be cool if somebody brought this character back? He is so cool. Hey, why don't I do that? So I pitched it to Dave Scroggie, my editor, and he thought about it and said, yeah, okay, let's do that. I was going to be doing a 24-page story, 8 pages a chapter over 3 issues. So I figured, okay. But the thing of Vanguard Illustrated, which was kind of an interesting idea, the shtick was that they would have one established professional working with a newcomer. So it was a tryout book in a way. Except, of course, I didn't want a newcomer. I wanted somebody who really knew their stuff. But luckily, we had Bill Lopes was doing something called Journey. It was a Western strip, and he had a very Will Eisner style, which, of course, was exactly what I wanted for this book. And we were able to pretend that he was a newcomer. So I wrote the story and I laid it out, and he did the finishes, and then I came back and I did the colors. And we wound up with the 3 issues. The only problem was it was supposed to be debuting at the San Diego Con in 1984, and it barely got there. The printer had some problems with it, but the first chapter was finally out. It was in Vanguard Illustrated #7, and I kept waiting for 8 and 4, but unfortunately, Pacific Comics went under. So that was like, oh, not again. Here we go. First, Starrich goes under, and then Pacific Comic goes under. The curse of the Gilbert here.
Yeah.
To make matters worse, I had met another gal, my future wife Janet, and we were going to move to California together. Well, of course, I hear about they're going under just as I'm making the trip to California. Like, oh, I don't have a job anymore. This is terrific, this and that here. But there was another new company that came out called Eclipse, another independent company. And my agent, Mike Friedrich, convinced them to put it out as all 3 issues as a single book, Mr. Monster #1. And apparently it was popular enough that they said, okay, let's do some more. Let's make this a regular title. So that was good.
Yeah, well, that's and I think, had I read that even the printing in the Vanguard, that first part of it was kind of disappointing as well.
Yeah, they had really screwed up the printing. They not only got it in late, the last day or the last hours of the last day of the San Diego Con, but they had messed up with the printing. So we had a second crack at the bat. So they shot it again, and this time it was decent printing.
Yeah. Oh, and it really, what you were doing with the coloring again, looks great. I mean, it's tricky to print because it's all the painted stuff, but as long as you can get a printer that prints it well, it looks great.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting with the printer. About less than just a few months before I had started working on, gotten that offer from ELRIC. I had done an 8-page story, and I did full color on that. I didn't have a person to buy it, this and that here, but it was my first chance of doing a full color comic. So I was doing airbrush and learning how to do color and this and that here. And it turned out it was just the right time to learn that, because I went from that to the ELRIC, which, here's your coloring, this and that here. By that time I got to Mr. Monster, I had done, 2 years of working on the ELRIC series and doing that color. And, we had some very neat effects.
Oh man, and it's gorgeous stuff. You've got Ken Brusnak doing lettering, which is a huge part of the look of, similar to what Howard Chaykin was doing with American Flag. I mean, Ken's abilities and his design sense just adds so much personality, and you combine that with your layouts and your storytelling and the fun of everything, and the end result is just I mean, these aren't necessarily hugely crazy layout pages that I pulled, but just a little example of some of the years of different books. It's a great result. and it kept you going for a long time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as the lettering goes, I saw Ken Brusenek's stuff on American Flag, and I said, this guy is phenomenal. He was doing this, slick science fiction-y lettering, but I figured anybody who could have this much expression with that might be good doing horror too, and he was great at it. So we had Ken Brusenek lettering, we had the beautiful inks that Bill Loebs did, and my goofy stories and finishes, finished the colorings. And it really pulled together.
How quickly, because we're going to start showing some of the collaborations, how quickly did you start getting attention from other artists? Because your book, right off the bat, I mean, issue 2, which I'd already talked a bit about, and I'll talk a little bit more here, you've got Dave Stevens doing a cover for. But how, so I would assume some peers kind of said, hey, we like this is cool.
Yeah, I was very fortunate with that, because for one thing, this monster killing hero was pretty unique back then. There was, you have everybody in the kitchen sink doing that nowadays, but there were very few. I mean, you had the Spectre and a few things like that, but not too many. I went to the San Diego convention in 83 or 84, I forget. And I saw Dave Stevens. I had Xeroxes of the story, the finished story, and gave it to him, and asked him if he'd be interested in doing a cover. Well, this is, right up his alley, his 1930s, 1940s pulp style stuff. So he agreed to do it. And around the same time, Alan Moore had been doing his Swamp Thing stuff that just knocked me for a loop. And I wrote a fan letter to DC saying this guy is just fantastic. Well, it turns out Alan got the letter, and he was a fan of the Wraith. And one day, my wife picks up the phone, and I said, "This guy Alan Moore from England, give me that thing." Mm-hmm. And we were speaking. We had a great talk, and a really nice guy. And I said, well, would you be interested in, maybe doing an 8-page story, scripting for Mr. Monster? And he said, yeah, he would. And he comes back in a couple of weeks, and he says, this is a little problem. I hope you don't mind, but it turned out to be 16 pages. Is that a problem? And I said, no, I don't think it's going to be much of a problem. And so that was one that I did most of the artwork for, since he was writing it.
Boo-hoo.
Great. That's awful. It's awful.
Well, and that's the neat thing about the Mr. Monster comics, and the formula of it is that it takes advantage of being whatever you wanted or needed it to be per issue. And, jokingly, it kind of reminds me of the gazillion of years of working on Dora the Explorer, where if Dora was a mermaid, gosh darn it, Dora was a mermaid. Mm-hmm. If Mr. Monster, if you wanted to fill it with one story, you had one story. You wanted to fill it with three. You want different artists. You want to make it in 3D, make it in 3D. Throw them into space, sounds good. And the weirder the guest artist and the wackier the style, sounds great. And it was a lot of fun. And even showing, let's see if I can go back to the one shot that was kind of collected Mr. Monster stuff here. Eventually, you also kind of used it as the kind of the horror host, character of comics, where you were able to have them kind of, show old comics.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Monster is always inspired by the old comics of the 40s and 50s and the pulps from the 30s and such. And the thing about Mr. Monster, it really, I designed it as my perfect vehicle for my stories and artwork, the stuff that I liked. And back in the 50s, they would have, either one story per issue, or they'd have 3 or 4 stories per issue, depending on what they felt like doing. Mm. And the thing about the stuff, even before I was working on ELRIC, I was working on these short stories, for science fiction here or Western or this or that here. But I was always experimenting, trying different art styles, different writing styles, and I did the same thing with Mr. Monster. And if I was doing a very serious Mr. Monster, we take the drawings more seriously. And if I was doing a Mad Magazine style funny Mr. Monster, I didn't take it as seriously. We could have him, blowing up New York, in the process of killing a monster. What the heck? It'll be back. New York will be back tomorrow. It doesn't matter.
Oh, and I tell you, as somebody who has never really had the chance to do this sort of work, this is the sort of thing I would just love to do. So I'm so envious and kind of amazed that you were able to do it, that you were able to kind of come up with that kind of character that succeeds in doing what I would want a character to do. So
well, I was very, very fortunate that I was doing this in the early to mid 80s, because that was the time when independent comics were really starting to flex their muscles. And you would get, there was a lot more experimentation than there had been before. You have Steve Rude's, Mike Barron's Nexus. You have Bill Loeb's Journey. All these really interesting comics that had, personal vision from the artist instead of the usual, this is what DC or Marvel is doing this week.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And you kept it going. And here's just a little bit of, through as many publishers as I think have existed in the history of independent publishers, you have a checklist of where Mr. Monster has been. And occasionally, like we've got Dave Dorman working with you on this, and that had a little bit of Bernie Wrightston working with you on there. I mean,
wow, yeah, that was amazing.
It's and oh man, Dave Gibbons working with you on a story.
Mm-hmm.
How great is that?
Oh, I couldn't believe that some of the talents I was able to work with. I write a story for Dave Gibbons, or I draw a story that Alan Moore wrote. I never thought I'd be in a position to work with people like that. But of course, I also started with Craig Russell. So, I was very fortunate.
Yeah. Oh, man. And Hemo Boy.
Well, I like one of the things I really like about Hemo Boy is this cute little kid, that who's also a monster. And of course, the whole thing about Mr. Monster is he hates monsters. He kills monsters. He's totally obsessed with that here. Well, this kid happens to be a Mr. Monster fan. He reads Mr. Monster comics. So you're identifying with this plasma bottle kid. At the same time, Mr. Monster's bound and determined to kill this kid. So how do you do that and get something with a happy ending somehow?
Oh, you did it. You had the mom. You had the creepy mom.
Mama Globin, yeah, she was horrible.
Spoiler alert, mom is
a giant commie blood cell.
Yes, you made her a commie too.
Yeah.
The Russian experiment gone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
I think the Cold War works again today. So this is good. Everything's all is new again.
Oh geez. It's so great. And like I said, as someone who my career never went that path. I kind of hopped on the commercial art bandwagon and then just kind of jumped on that train, and never had the story ability or the storytelling ability, especially the writing ability that artists and cartoonists like you have. So I wanted to kind of ask you a little bit. You had sent me a story you had just colored that was a Merry Monster story that was it gonna be from issue 3 of your Tundra series? Was that it?
Yeah, I had done. Tundra started putting books out around 1991, 92, and I was doing a number of mini-series for them. I did a 3-issue Mr. Monster Attacks series and a humor horror thing called Crack a Boom, and one starring Kelly, which was the Mr. Monster's Gal Friday, Kelly Friday. and this is going to be one of the features. Well, before we can get these books out, Tundra collapsed. I'm seeing a theme here. But we
it's you, isn't it?
And yeah, I still keep rising. I can't figure it out. So we had done this thing in 1992. I wrote and drew it. And the first 2 issues of the Kelly series had been colored, but this 3rd issue hadn't been. So this wasn't. So right now I wanted to put together a Mr. Monster library and sell it later on. But
and you've been doing a lot of recoloring on your Facebook page. You show some of your going back and kind of George Lucasing, or at least being able to kind of fix some wrongs that had been done over the decades,
right?
Or just pure technology things that just what you had in your head just wasn't going to happen at that time, and now.
Right, like that's such as this. One of the first computer colored story was in an issue of Mr. Monster. It was a backup feature, a 3-pager, and Steve Oliff illustrated a Jeff Bonnevert's story, and it was the very first, as far as I know, the very first computer colored story in comics. And so when we got to Tundra, Laverne Kadinsky was doing computer color. This was about 1992. And I wrote a story, black and white and dead all over, to showcase computer color because I was really intrigued by it. But I had never even turned on a computer at that point. So, go 25 years later, I do computer coloring, and I went back and I colored my story for the first time, finally completing it after all these years.
Well, let me ask you, as somebody who I don't know if I'm just incredibly intimidated by the idea of writing and drawing my own story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, but it just seems like I get all up in here. So kind of looking at this story as an example, doesn't have to be, but to begin with, how do you kind of form your story, gear up for a story, and not talk yourself out of it? Or how do you kind of figure out which ones to talk yourself out of and which ones? How do you get over that stumbling block of, nah? Because it's a lot different when you're kind of, in theory, when you're drawing your own story, you're kind of digging your own grave as an artist sometimes.
Yeah.
Or is it often a visual that kind of sparks these things?
Well, it can be a combination. Well, although it's ironic that we're talking about this Merry Monster story, because I originally wrote that for someone else to illustrate. So I had done some very tight layouts with my story, this and that. The person, tried their best, but they didn't do it. So at the last minute, I was forced to illustrate my own story. I'm glad I finally did it. There was another one, a Mr. Monster story that I wrote in 1985. And it consisted of a cartoony Mr. Monster contrasted against a very realistic art style, for dramatic effect. It was a certain thing with my story. And, I needed someone like, Craig Russell or something like that, but I didn't have it. So I just put it aside for 30 years and came across it when I was making preparations to move to Ohio. I saw this things again, and I said, I got to do this story. It's a great story. And again, I didn't have anyone to do it. And I said, oh man, I'm going to have to draw this in a realistic style. And I hate drawing things in a realistic style. So I had to, take some photos and,
realistic artist is crying tears for you.
Yes. Yeah, you're stuck with that. I'm not.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, that's the thing, with working with Craig, Craig Russell works with a lot of photo reference, this and that here. And I try to avoid that. I like I find myself much more spontaneous if I can just draw. I'm more cartoonist.
Well, and even that, to kind of break in, I was talking with Ron Friends in June, and his attitude was, I don't know how anyone has time to do that, because for him it was almost a necessity to not use photo reference like that, because otherwise you don't get anything done. It takes too much time. And he's right.
Well, it depends how you do it. If you set up, if you photograph the whole story beforehand and autograph it or whatever, you can wind up with something good. But
yeah, oh no, it's not the quality. I think it was more the
time. Yeah,
the time.
Yeah, it's certainly works against the grain for me. I know that. But so I just forced myself to do it, and I found out I was really happy with the results. I don't want to do it again, but
but I mean, at this point for you, and that's what I'm so gosh darn envious, is that this fake stumbling block I have in my head of not allowing myself to just come up with stories. The fact that I'm just going, that's dumb. Simpsons did it, or anything like that, is just a baloney. Just do it. These things don't have to be. It's not Citizen Kane.
Right.
Just get over it. Come up with something fun that you're going to have fun drawing, and just be crazy, and have fun and do it.
Yeah.
How do you know, or at what point are you pacing the page count for stories? Do you write down scripts, or do you just start scribbling on paper, with a rough idea in your head, maniacally laughing, and next thing you know, something's 7 pages or something's 22 pages?
Well, what I do, I should point out that I was in between all this, I was doing scripts for Disney comics for about 20 years. And the way they worked it there is you would write up a brief synopsis, a page or two, talking about the whole story, what's going to happen here, this and that here. And I found that valuable. And so I do that with Mr. Monster most of the time. I'll write the basic idea of what's going on. If I have an idea for some dialogue, I'll add that so I know to remember to include it. And then I go back and start laying down the story in miniature. So, I have a basically almost comic book size, and I can start just roughly penciling this and that. And if I don't like it, I just start with another page and try it again, or a third or fourth try. But none of it has to be, super tight or anything like that. And it gives me a chance to see how it moves. Now with Mr. Monster, a lot of the times I make my own page count. So I do whatever it is. But sometimes, you have 8 pages for this issue and you better make it work. So, I'll do what I have to do.
And, geez, do you, with your own stuff, with Mr. Monster stuff, how often was it just purely stories brought about by you wanted to draw something?
It varies. Sometimes there's a visual that really strikes me and I want to do a story with that, or, the punchline or this or that. Sometimes there are more verbal stories. There's stuff I want to say in the stories. And then the artwork is, secondary.
Oh man. It's well, I mean, it's kind of, it's an intimidating thing to set yourself up for sitting down at a drawing table and, only yourself to blame as you're drawing it. As you're into like a long night, there's no shaking your fist at a writer for coming up with a huge, fight scene. It's
when I was doing that realistic one, I was cursing the writer, which was me.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for making it difficult for myself. Thank you. All right, I'll step up to the plate.
Well, and most of my career has been being a mimic and having to do different techniques, different styles, and so I really like books and stories that do that, or even creators that are interested in doing that. So at some point, when you see stuff, if I ever get off my butt, you'll be like, "Oh, that Akins guy is just he's just copying me, isn't he?" Yeah, I am. Which actually brings me to one of my favorite pieces that you've done for DC, your stories issue of Batman's Legends of the Dark Knight, which does kind of exactly one of the things that I would love to do myself, which is within one story pay tribute to the art styles of other artists. And this was a really cool story of a person who is in trouble, but he's trapped with other people, and they're saying, "Oh, Batman's gonna save him," and he says, "There's no Batman," and they start telling stories of how they've met Batman, and their stories go through time, and of course, to fit with that, you adapt different techniques of the period, the proper period Batman artists.
Right. Well, I started with I figured my three favorite periods were the very early Bob Kane's from the 30s and early 40s, and the Dick Sprang, Bill Finger ones from the 1950s, and the Neil Adams, Denny O'Neill's from the 70s and 60s. And what I had was, in the first one, I had Julie Madison, which was Batman's girlfriend, Bruce Wayne's girlfriend in the comics from the 30s, the late 30s. Only I had her in real time, so she was now in her 80s, and she tells the story of how she, was with Batman back then, and she saw him, and I drew it in the style of the very early Bob Kane. And then when we get to the 50s, I drew it in Dick Sprang's kind of expressionistic style, more cartoony, which I had a real affinity for. I really enjoyed drawing both of those. And then we got to the Neil Adams, and that was the one that was the toughest for me because it's a more illustrative style, and I'm not an illustrator, I'm a cartoonist. So once again, I had to step up to the plate and change my style and see if I can make this work. So I was doing all these crazy layouts, these psychedelic layouts and such, and I pulled it off.
Yeah, it's a fun issue, and I think it's a memorable one. I mean, in a series that had a lot of talented people working on it, it's a great standout issue. It's a keeper, I guess, is probably the best way of saying it. Which that's a pretty cool thing to see. And this is one of the original, taken from the original art of kind of when Batman actually shows up.
And you don't actually see his face. He's whatever you want him to be.
And I love your kind of end zing, kind of almost a Twilight Zone tribute, where the character who has never seen Batman, doesn't believe Batman exists, gets his glasses knocked off right before Batman shows up.
Right. There are none so blind as those who will not see. So even when he had a chance to finally see him, he didn't see him.
Oh man, that poor guy. And then your other cool project with DC was your Man and Superman prestige format book, which was another really neat looking book about a kind of a bitter kind of schlub of a guy who gets kind of bitter that Superman has it easy, and he manages to switch places with Superman and learn a couple of life lessons.
Well, in both cases, it was a dream come true. These characters I grew up with, and I finally got a chance to do my versions of them. So I was really trying to do a Joe Shuster early Superman kind of style, with a little bit of Wayne Boring, which my two favorite Superman artists from the 50s and thereabouts.
That's neat stuff. How hard was it to pitch things to DC?
Well, I've only gotten a couple of, a few stories, so it's not easy. If I thought that, having done like this would get me a lot of work, it didn't. So, but I had a chance to have this in this prestige format, which was very, very satisfying.
And I guess the other side question is, would you want it to lead to more? I mean, there's a weird kind of, especially nowadays, where the notion of signing off that contract, that work for hire contract, or whatever the deal is with their characters, is so different than today's playing field of owning everything yourself. Is it in today's standards, do you think as big of a deal to, I mean, obviously it's really neat to do it, to say, to check off that bucket list and have like a neat, issue of something and say, there you go, I got to do it. But do you think that it's even as big of a deal now compared to 30 years ago to be like, let's say, I did 6 years on Batman kind of creator?
Yeah, I don't know. It's always been a combination going back and forth. The Disney stuff I've done was work for hire and such. Yeah, it's just, you do your own thing here and you do that thing here, and it works.
Well, it seems kind of interesting that your career was kind of an early version of what people now are really, really striving to do. It's people now are, I think, creators are looking a little less at saying, oh, no, this is what it's got to be. You've got to be Marvel and DC. And now we're finding that the sales numbers for sequential art or graphic novels or comics, the sales numbers are more in cartooning. The sales numbers are in young adult, and Dav Pilkey and Raina doing her series that go to school sales or to younger buyers. Yeah. And that the notion of Marvel and DC isn't necessarily the big deal that it used to be anymore.
I don't think so. No, things have changed. Is there any chance I could have 2 minutes?
Of course.
Okay.
Yep. We're gonna take a break.
All right.
Oh, baby. Well, Joe, we're gonna take a break, and guess what? We haven't done this in a while.
You bought something.
What did Dave buy? Let's see what, because I have stuff sitting around, and let's see what I got. Oh man, let's get rid of it.
Oh, I saw something there.
I got Superpowers Flash.
Oh wow.
Oh, this is the only one that I've got the original on the card, so I might have to keep him. But the hysterical thing about this is that I care nothing about modern, and so this one, he's got the little chin, the chin thing. Just give me some flesh paint, and I'll paint that chin thing right off. So that's something. But we're not going to stop there. No, it's a twofer.
What else did Dave buy?
Oh baby, this one. This one's bizarre. This one, I don't even know why they chose to make it, but I collect Ditko's Blue Beetle figures. I read Booster Gold from the start. Quite frankly, maybe we can have my brother paint Booster Gold to look like somebody else. But anytime somebody comes out with a Steve Ditko Blue Beetle figure, well, dang it, I'm opening up my wallet and I'm buying that damn thing.
That's great.
Except for the time that DC directed one where he was overweight, and I just viewed that as a complete and utter insult to the character.
Right.
So take
that Blue Beetle thing. Let me see that again. Or are you showing something else?
Oh no, I'm just trying to take it out of the dang package.
Oh, you're going to open it. Is there like some sort of like set piece that goes with them, or is it just two figures?
I don't know, man. It's there's like stands in here.
Oh, okay, yeah. I see.
There's some bases and some and trading cards. But then you just get you get Ted and you get Booster.
Very
and
what's his little accessories there that comes with Blue Beetle?
Well, he's got his gun, and I think the gun's got a little bit of grappling hook attached to it, which kind of doesn't look like that comes out. So I don't know. I have a hard time ruining my toys, but that looks like it needs to go right out. And Michael's back. Michael,
Hey.
we like to waste time sometimes on the show where I buy toys and see what I bought live on the internet.
God
So,
bless. Yeah.
so I'm killing time by opening up my my Steve Ditko Blue Beetle figure that just came out.
Ooh, all right.
Because supposedly Todd McFarlane thought that he could sell a bunch of Steve Ditko Ted Cord Blue Beetle figures.
Did that work?
Well, it just came out, and my prediction is that by in January these will be on clearance for $10, and I'll feel like a fool for paying kind of close to full price.
And I will enjoy my $10 Blue Beetle.
Yes, and I'll just tell everybody, and then you guys can go buy $10 Blue Beetle figure. Were you a Charlton fan by any chance?
Yeah, it depends which comic, but yes, they had some of the best and some of the worst.
The printing was so bad.
Oh man, then they have I think they had a printing press that printed cereal boxes and things like that.
Well, they were definitely one of those print houses where they said, what can we do to keep the printers running 24 hours a day?
Mm-hmm.
And they were definitely one of the ones that they said, oh, these comic books, but the typewriter text typography, oh dear God.
Yeah, they would have a big typewriter they moved the pages in, and it was lettered by a machine. That was the credit they gave it to.
And the stapling was terrible. I mean, I have so many Charlton books where the staples aren't in the damn gutter. They're like like a half inch over or something horrible.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Ted.
Well, they had some really mediocre artists back in the late 50s, early 60s. I won't name the names. And they had, a guy was a human typewriter writing the stuff. I mean, Joe Gilbert some stuff, and some of it was really good, and some of it was kind of poor. But anytime you saw Steve Ditko drawing something, was always good. And they had Jim Aparo. He started out there, did some great work.
Yep, he did Nightshade. I was a big fan of his work on Nightshade, and I loved all the Ditko stuff. And
Pete Morrissey.
Pete Morrissey. Oh yeah, doing
Thunderbolt, T-Bolt.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It was neat stuff. I don't know how I think I got into it by the modern reprints, but and then went back and started getting some of the Charlton books when I was a younger lad.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of toys, let's take a look here at the history of Mr. Monster. And it's not hard being a completist of Mr. Monster toys.
Mm-hmm.
But at least there are some, and the bust by Bowen, Randy Bowen, is gorgeous. I have mine. It's right behind me. The first action figure by Fresh Monkey came out a year or two ago. That one's still available, and that was in their Secret Wars kind of tribute line of figures from Mattel's Secret Wars line, and now available through Big Bad Toy Store for pre-order is Mr. Monster in more of a Superpowers kind of style tribute to Kenner's Superpowers line,
Mm-hmm.
which I'll admit I was ready to kind of pounce on this if it didn't make its pre-order amount, but it did, so I still need to put my order in on this bad boy.
Okay.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you get these three things, you've got the complete toy statue collection of Mr. Monster, right?
So far. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know because I get a little compulsive in my, completionist.
Oh, well, let's put a $1,000 one.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Please do. That'd be great. You were talking about Disney Adventures. There's an example of one of the issues. I miss that magazine so much.
Mm-hmm.
it was such a cool. I was not the age that I would be buying it, but just the idea of it, and the fact that it was at grocery stores. It was part articles, part comics. And this was a series that not only did you write for, but your wife Janet wrote a lot for as well.
Yeah, Janet's a superb comic book writer. She's concentrating on the Disney characters and such, and she was doing that for, I think, 25 years, 28 years.
Fantastic. Here's a couple of her work, and a lot of it was with what, Egmont?
Yeah, Egmont.
Denmark.
In Denmark, the way it works is we were both doing stories for them, and it's a company that creates comic book stories with the Disney characters from all over the creators from all over the world, and publishers in 50 different countries come to their website and pick and choose which comics they want to publish for the particular Disney comics. So Sweden will have one, and Germany will have one, and India will have one, and so our things are seen by millions and sometimes a billion people. So,
oh, that's crazy, and it's that's wild.
And it goes back to what you were talking about earlier too, about work for hire versus your own stuff. I'd be working on this, and I would help pay the bills, and then I would do my Mr. Monster stuff, and the stuff that I would own.
Well, and that's the sort of thing that I was never really able to do. We're going to talk about some of your commissions here in a second, but I got kind of caught up in just taking the work for the money, and having that be 100% of what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And for better or for worse. I mean, obviously for better financially. But it does have every choice, it's hard to have both. It's hard to have the kind of that fulfilling creative side of things, and as much, I guess, sitting in the bank as you could. There's almost, when you're self-employed, there's a little bit of a voice in your head, at least in mine, that says, you could be making more money.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so now after decades of that, that little voice that says, hey, when are you going to get around for doing some things that you might actually, enjoy doing, or might, be a little bit more creatively interesting? And I think I was mentioning this to William Stout, and he called it the velvet trap.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I was like, yeah, I kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing. It's a balancing act. I mean, as it happens, I enjoy doing the Egmont work. The thing that was appealing to me, of course, was these are characters that I grew up with, Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, Uncle Scrooge, all that stuff. And it was in a format that was one of the very few comics out there nowadays that they're not connected with, 5,000 years of continuity. You can have an 8-page story or a 12-page story, and they're independent. As long as you know the basic characters, you can write your story. It's very much like comics of the 40s and 50s. So I felt comfortable doing that. What I couldn't get over is some of these giant crossovers that DC and Marvel has with 50 comics and 1,000 characters. And I don't want to have to look at my comic book encyclopedia to figure out who these guys are and what they do and what their whole history was for the last 50 years. It's just, I'm not interested.
Well, and even worse, I think, was the side effects that those things had on people that were working for Marvel and DC and didn't think that they would have to be a part of that. It would bleed over, and it would be like, okay, I have a story, I'm doing my story. And then it seemed like editorial would say, you gotta make room for this now. And it would be like, that wasn't, it was like the Lando changing the part of the deal.
Yeah, let me see if I can screw up the momentum you were building with your series with this stupid crossover that won't matter in 2 years, because we'll have another crossover that will negate this one.
Yeah. Well, and it seems to me, looking at the history of DC and Marvel became very quickly unappealing to me. Like it just didn't seem like, it seemed like if I was going to work for hire, that I'd be much better off working for, Nickelodeon and Simon and Schuster and Random House doing my children's books, where the pay up front is good and the workload isn't bad, and just not be in comics at all. And that if I were to be in comics, to do it myself and, have control over and be the control freak that I am about that sort of thing. So, again, I kind of turn to creators like yourself and kind of get a lot of inspiration and kind of a little bit of a roadmap from that. And hopefully at some point I can get off my butt and
well, why don't you write a story and pretend that you're doing it for someone else?
Oof.
And then draw it yourself.
Yep. No, you're right. I'll have to see if I can figure it out. In the meantime, you are also doing commissions occasionally. Now, when do you like doing commissions?
Yeah, I usually, do commissions of characters I like. If I'm doing stuff from the 40s and stuff, the more leeway I have, the more I like it. And particularly if I can do Mr. Monster commissions, which means I can reuse them later on. But yeah, I usually enjoy it.
And getting a hold of you, your email is good. If anybody's watching and they want to get a hold of you, shoot you an email, right?
Yeah, this will work.
All righty. So let's take a look. I just pulled some. Now this one was kind of a redo, wasn't it?
I did this for a fanzine in 1980, 81 or thereabouts, 1980.
Daredevil checklist. I pretty much it's got a gorgeous Frank Miller cover too, but I remember as a kid opening it up and seeing that in there. And quite frankly, at this point, I would totally dig seeing you do the Golden Age Daredevil. It seems like you would. That's another kind of character with him and Yellow Claw that would totally fit.
Well, I did do a story with the Yellow Claw for Next Issue Comics that Image put out. The Claw was the main yellow peril supervillain that the Golden Age Daredevil used to fight. Except I had Yellow Claw in the 21st century, and he's this old guy, and he's getting full. He's always on PC because he's the Yellow Claw, and geez, it's not easy being a Yellow Claw in the 21st century.
That wasn't the kind of Eric Larson's kind of fake Golden Age series?
Yeah, it was. He had.
Okay. I have that one. I have those. They were great. They were a lot of. Now that again, that's another crazy kind of cockamamie thing that I would love to do but I would want to do it all. My goal is to do a book where it's different artists, but they're just all fake names, and it's just me. I love seeing you do cover recreations, especially when people having you do the Golden Age stuff. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, I enjoy them. They're a nice little challenge. I get to draw these characters that I saw but never had a chance to actually draw professionally, so it's kind of neat.
It's interesting talking to artists that some of them love commissions for that reason, and some of them hate commissions for exactly that same reason.
Well, if I hate a commission, I just won't take it. So it's really simple.
Yeah.
And the thing of it is also that I do a column for Alter Ego, Mr. Monster's Comic Crypt. I've been doing that for about 22 years. And when I get my some of these covers and whatnot, I do a portfolio section periodically. As a matter of fact, I've got a couple coming up very shortly with color versions of some of these imaginary covers and such that I've done. So I'm the kind of guy that doesn't believe that anything's real in comics unless it's in print. Once it's in print, then it's real.
Yeah, and I agree. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to figure out. You've probably seen me spend, the past 5-7 years trying to do portraits and things, and they've just been for collectors. And now it's, I've got a couple of covers coming out from Moonstone this year, but I need to, I guess I need to start putting together a portfolio and trying to do things, because I'm the same way, at least in terms of commercial art illustration. I like seeing it in print. I like seeing it published.
Mm-hmm. And once it's published, I like it when it's scanned and it's sent out throughout the world in a different format. But I like having both of them.
I love the Spider-Man piece. That is, oh man. That's so great. The combination of you and Ditko's characters is a super cool combo.
Well, it was always one of my all-time greatest influences. I mean, it was him. Going back as far as the Marvel mystery comics from the late 50s. I remember getting Tales to Astonish #1 from my grandmother when I was about 8 or 9, and there was a backup. Steve Ditko backup, and I was just fascinated with his art style. There was something both ethereal and earthy at the same time, and I've always tried to do that with myself.
Yeah. Joe has been so much. Joe is a Steve Ditko ride or die. Joe, you have been getting all of the work he's published, every Kickstarter. You have them, don't you?
Yep, everything.
Good man.
Yeah, he's one of my very favorites for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Way beyond everybody knows Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, but there's a lot more Ditko out there.
It's crazy.
It's been fascinating, going his own way.
He definitely is like the most fascinating comic book artist ever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's true.
Oh, well, we've hit our hour and a half mark, and I just keep on meaning to ask the artists that I have a couple of basic questions about the studios and how you work. So I'm going to try to remember this, but okay. Your studio, messy or clean? Not talking about right now because you're packing it up.
Right.
Normally, are you a messy studio guy or a clean studio guy?
When I start, it's nice and clean. By the time I finish a story, there is tracing paper everywhere. I can't stand it, and I'm just so glad when I finish it that I can finally clean it. And right now, I'm in my wife and I just bought a house a couple of weeks ago. We're going to be going in there in about a week or so. So everything's packed up back here. If you see these boxes and whatnot, we're in the process. Which is funny because this is going to be our second house. Our first one was we bought in '92 and we sold it about 4 years ago. Renting ever since. We were looking for a house for 4 years. Finally found it, and but it was hell moving the first time and getting rid of comics and going artwork.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, I don't even have to ask this. You're a collector. We know.
Yes.
I have a lot of illustrator friends, a lot of commercial artist friends who are also collectors, and I have a problem as well. New studio, basement studio, or are you going to be above ground dweller?
Still basement again. So
all right, basement dweller.
I like my privacy. It works okay.
Are you a music listener as you work, or no music?
Yes, I listen to music when I'm drawing or writing. I keep the music kind of low when I'm writing. I can listen to podcasts when I'm drawing, but I can't do it when I'm writing. So,
yeah, I find there's when the only part I think maybe of when I'm laying out a book and trying to figure out my game plan and actually trying to understand what the hell I've gotten myself into is usually the only time where I actually have to think, and that's when things get quiet. When you're listening to music, what's your go-to?
Well, I've been listening to a lot of Leanne Rimes lately. Of course, the Beatles, Simon & Garfunkel, once in a while Elvis Costello, but stuff that doesn't jar me too much, because I want to be able to concentrate on what I'm doing.
I love it. Sounds good. Thank you so much for taking the time amongst your move to hang out with us. And
pleasure.
Let me pick your brain again. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and always a pleasure seeing you at conventions. And like I said before, been a fan of your work. Probably since I was 12.
Oh, geez, wow, I'm old. Well, thanks so much, Dave, and I really admire your work too. You do some great portraits and such.
Well, thanks. I mean, a lot of it is very much similar to what you were saying with, well, most of my career is kind of similar to, you and Janet and your work with Disney, is that, it's a lot of fun and it definitely pays the bills, but, it is what it is. And
Well, it helped us get our first house, so I can't complain.
Well, and what are you working on once the move kind of wraps up? What's going to be next for you?
Well, what I've been working on for the past year, and I want to continue to work on, is I want to do. I'm putting together a Mr. Monster library. So having started with Mr. Monster in 1983, the technology has changed so much. So I had negatives, film negatives. Color color comps and all this other stuff, and I've been converting them all into digital form. And in the process, there were a few stories I was not happy with the coloring, so I recolored them on my computer, and which is it's just glorious to finally see correct mistakes and such. I'm not going the Neil Adams route where you change everything completely and overkill with the color and everything, but I'm trying to do it tastefully.
Well, even like this was kind of one of the first starts at collecting in nice hardcover form your beginnings work, but the coloring in it is hit and miss. Like the reproduction of coloring is hit and miss. So it'll be really nice to have something that you've really gotten to not only take advantage of modern printing and modern technology, but that you'll really be kind of saying, okay, this is it. This is going to get it right. And
well, that's the great thing about computer coloring too, is I've scanned some of the original colors, some of which was might have faded away or this or that, and I can punch up the blacks. I can make that there's splotches, I can get rid of them. In one instance, I had a story, a 38-page story of Mr. Monster Airboy, that I was forced to make some drastic changes when it was published. And that's one. It was originally supposed to be a Mr. Monster Heap story, Heap being the Golden Age version of the Swamp Thing. Well, the publishers decided they wanted to be an Airboy thing. So Airboy was a minor character. It became a major character, so I had to rewrite. Well, I've gone back and I've gone to my original story and I've redrawn it, pages, so it was the way I originally wanted it, and then I recolored the entire story, 39 pages, something I couldn't have conceived of, 20 years ago. It just wasn't. But having no pressing deadlines, I can do this kind of stuff I wanted to do, which was actually the same way that I started out in the 70s. I feel like doing something, I'll do it, and then I'll try and sell it. So I'm doing that with this also.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I mean, it's actually kind of says a lot if that's one of the few, or possibly one of the only stories that you feel like maybe, or not maybe, or that you feel like editorial kind of got in there and mucked things up.
Right.
It's nice that you don't have a checklist of like 24.
No, I consider myself fortunate that I was able to do most of what I wanted to do, with a minimum of interference. So that was the only major one that I can think of, and I was able to go back there and correct it. And it's a much better story.
And one of the neat things, because we've talked about you going from every publisher that's ever existed,
And a couple
you've always retained your rights to everything, as long as it didn't feature another character that has a different owner. So you have the ability to collect everything and put it in one place and kind of make it so that anyone that wants to get into Mr. Monster isn't playing this crazy game of, okay,
Right.
where do I go next? Well, there was a
Well, that's the thing.
put out some issues,
Well, the thing of it is, Mr. Monster has been in so many different places and so many different things here. It would be really nice. I've always wanted to be able to collect them all together, so people will be able to get it in one thing and see the progression and see just how much variety I've done with Mr. Monster over the years, from deadly serious 200-page graphic novel origins to just silly, stupid little things here. There's just like that Mary Monster thing you're looking at, just like imitation girls comics from the 50s.
This was a fun one that Ken and you did. With I was just kind of looking through that again before the show, and had totally. I mean, a lot of these things the brain forgets how much. Okay, and again, this is how I get into trouble with Gavin. I was going through looking for some art files last month, and was finding things that I had no memory of ever doing. Do you have that ever happen where you go, "Oh, I drew that story"?
Yeah, you do sort of. You see some less, certainly with certain pinups and such. It's like, what's that? But like you say, yeah, sometimes you do, and it's like, oh, this is interesting. I kind of forgot about this. I don't want to forget. Let's include this in this project too. It's exciting when you go to the old stuff. As I was saying, in the process of doing this book series that I'm proposing, I had to go through boxes and boxes of original artwork and stats, and then shoot them and clean them up, and just a lot of work. But I'm glad I did it then, because it would be really difficult in the process of moving and starting at this point. Now that's all done. It's just I can do coloring on my computer. I don't have to look through boxes or anything like that.
How much of your Mr. Monster art, original art, is in collectors' hands?
There's probably less than 100 pages.
So a lot of it is really is sitting there with you.
I have a lot of it. Some of my collaborators have some. But I have a fair amount. Yeah.
Oh, that's neat. Well, I know. I tell you, even with the work I do, there is something fun about having things collected in one place as the decades go by, just almost as having something for yourself, of just the ease of referring to it.
Well, yeah. It's amazing. And of course now with you can sort of have that digitally nowadays. I've been laying this stuff out in digital form so I could see how everything's going to flow together and what goes first and second and third. So you see that, but it's certainly exciting when you finally see it in a book form, assuming that the publishers don't screw it up.
Yeah. Oh, well, any appearances coming up? Are you pretty much done for the year? Because
I'm done for the year. I'm very happy to just be moving and not have anything to think about at the moment. So that's great. Well,
we wish you a happy, safe move, and very excited. Setting up a new studio is kind of fun.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. And luckily, my last move was about 2,500 miles. This one was about 25 miles, so it's going to be much easier all the way around.
Oh man! Well, thanks again. Our best to you. We'll see. We'll see you down the road, and look forward to seeing the collection of the Mr. Monster stuff. That's going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Yeah.
Oh baby. Well, hey, I'm a little bit south of 2 hours. That's my gab fest. You shoot for an hour, knowing it's going to be an hour and a half. And then it ends up being almost 2 hours.
Another great interview.
Oh, so sorry. Jeepers, Daphne. Well, Joe, thanks again for doing this. I guess it's time. Is it time? Yep. Bluto's telling us goodbye forever again. And I'll just do my ridiculous plugs. 14th through the 16th next weekend, Motor City Comic Con. I will be in Novi, Michigan with Andy Bennett. And that's going to be another Motor City Comic Con. And then December 2nd through 4th, Joe, you're going to join us up here in Columbus.
planning to join you for my first. That'll be my first GalaxyCon. Yeah,
That'll be all of our first GalaxyCon, and we'll see just what the heck these crazy GalaxyCon people do. Other than that, I guess we better get out of here before we turn into pumpkins. So thanks again for joining us on Dave and Joe Are Bored YouTube inaugural edition. Woof! I'm tingly just thinking about it.
it's exciting. Like and share.
Like and subscribe and share, and maybe we'll do this again. I'm Dave Akins.
Joe Holland. Good night, everybody.
That's Empire.